Today, we have two speakers, Ms. Deepa Varadarajan and Ms. Manisha Joshi. They are the co-founders of Pramiti Philanthropy Partners that provides holistic advice and assistance to philanthropists to enable them to achieve their long-term philanthropic objectives in their preferred area of interest. They assist philanthropists and corporates with their philanthropy strategy and roadmap, partner organization identification and diligence, ongoing grant monitoring and evaluation, and philanthropy portfolio management. Having worked with Asha for Education Dallas, Give India, Dasra, and India Philanthropy Initiative, Deepa brings over a decade of experience in philanthropy advisory and grant assessments. Deepa built the HNI giving vertical at Give India to engage and assist over 50 HNI, UHNI families in their personal philanthropy by providing customized solutions to meet their philanthropic objectives. Customized solutions included connecting to NGOs, grant management, monitoring, and peer connects. As a co-founder of Pramiti Philanthropy Partners, Manisha Joshi has a decade of social sector experience. Entrepreneur with an engineering and business management background, Manisha has groomed and managed two IT ventures in her previous avatar before making a switch to the development sector in 2010. She was a part of HNI giving vertical with the erstwhile Give India, where she managed grant portfolios for families and foundations. She has also been associated with Dasra and Humane Society International India and worked with Maharashtra state government as a steering committee member for their drought-proofing mission. So let's not delay further. Deepa and Manisha, please take over.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's a phenomenal and exciting topic. And we will try and share whatever we can from the collective experience that Manisha and I have on this space and our journey and what we have learned from our journey in this space. And hopefully by the end of this 1 hour odd session that you will have specific takeaways that are, I'm sure burning questions in your head as to where will we find such HNIs, how can we build, how can we get started, build, and hopefully grow this HNI base. So the way we have essentially structured this initiative or this session is by trying to answer the basics, starting with the who part of it. And we will get to the how and the where part of it slowly by the end of this session. But it's important for us to just get a sense of the house as to what or who do you guys consider as a HNI donor essentially. And this is where I would like to kind of launch one poll here. And if you could quickly take a minute of your time to kind of, answer this poll question. I hope you guys can see it at this point. It would be interesting for us to just get a sense of the house on what you guys think of who do you consider as a high net worth donor for your organization. I'm just going to share the results with all of you quickly. So it's a very, very interesting mix, and clearly, it all depends on what the budget of your organization is, as well as who do you think worthwhile in terms of a person that you would want to spend your time to ensure the right return on the time investment that you make for that purpose. And what we would be covering today is essentially the segment, in terms of the people giving anywhere from 3 to 50 lakhs. Of course, the same set of people can give 1 lakh as well, but largely our focus of the presentation today would be around the HNI segment or the high net worth segment. Now, the 21% folks who voted for the 50 lakh to the 2 crore segment, there will be some takeaways for you guys, and we would be happy to address some of the questions towards the end. But these would largely be your ultra high net worth folks who can give you anywhere between 50 lakh to a 2 crore kind of giving. And for those folks, the level of engagement and the way you would approach them will be very, very different from what you would get from the presentation today. So I thought it's important for us to set that expectation upfront. And again, like I said, happy to kind of look at some of those things towards the end as Q&A to help you guys out with as well. So the good news here essentially is for the bulk of the people who are joining us today, that we have a greater flow of capital that is flowing in from the HNIs into this sector. And many of these are actually very, very different from the traditional donor base that you would have normally engaged with. And these are largely professionals that you would want to look at, who come out of these consulting firms, who are CXOs of MNCs companies. They are partners in law, banking firms, as well as the small and medium entrepreneurs. And that is the segment that we are going to be focusing on today, where the typical giving of these folks is anywhere between 3 to 50 lakhs per annum as a giving portfolio size, and per organization as well, depending on what their giving evolvement or what their evolution in their giving itself is. And these people are generally, you can guesstimate that their estimated annual income is at least 1 crore plus per annum. Now, for the folks who actually talked about, in people being interested or their interest being in the 50 lakh to 2 crore segment, fall under the right side of this column, which is the ultra high net worth folks. And these are people generally with an estimated net worth of at least 100 crore plus. And if a person wants to give 1 crore plus to an organization, they will most likely have a foundation team and work very similar to your CSR foundations, as well as a board of trustees and advisors through which the proposal normally goes through. So the way you would approach them will be very, very different. It is still personal philanthropy, but yet the functionings are very, very similar to your CSR kind of folks. Okay. Now coming to the the next poll. Before we again, we covered the who is an HNI. Now, what do you believe, or why do you think there is a benefit in having HNIs as part of your fundraising base? So I would like to you guys to answer, take a minute of your time again to answer one more poll question with respect to saying, what do you believe is the primary benefit, according to you, at this stage of your organization to have HNI donors? Okay, sharing results with you guys again. So 44% of you feel that it's essentially for unrestricted, flexible funding that you require an HNI, or for new, followed by new ideas initiatives. So I'm really sorry to uh, break this myth that HNIs are exclusively for unrestricted, flexible funding. They will eventually, with respect to once you build a certain level of comfort and relationship between with them. But at the beginning, it is going to be largely programmatic funding or for new ideas and initiatives. So you have to, it cannot be straight away for unflexible funding for your organization. There are few institutions and foundations that do offer for capacity building or for unrestricted funding of organizations, but they are very few far in between. So at this point, the large donor base that you would have is no different from your retail, honestly, where they want to be associated with a specific outcome and want to know that their money is making a difference. So you would have to start from a programmatic funding with some percentage that is tied to unrestricted, but it cannot be all unrestricted funding at this point, as if you begin that journey with that particular individual today. So here I want to nuance it a little bit and say that HNI donor is similar, yet slightly different to your traditional donor who could be in the form of a retail or a CSR or even government today, right? So he's a human at the end of the day, except that in retail, you don't see that face. In CSRs, you generally deal with multiple layers of people before you get to it. Here, you will directly interact with the principal or the decision maker. So that is the biggest difference here compared to the other folks. These are donors who will start emotionally, but also have a very rational approach to their giving. So often the first giving or a cause as you engage with them is going to be extremely personal. So you will have to listen to them, you will have to do your research, understand and appeal to that personal trigger, right? So we have seen as an example where HNIs typically tend to fund, who tend to fund education is either because they themselves have benefited from education or scholarships in their lives and hence want to give back and feel that is the strongest force. Or we have seen HNIs where they get into cancer funding or health related funding because they believe they unfortunately have suffered some kind of personal loss in the same as the thing with intellectual disability or a mental health kind of issue. With wildlife or animals because they have a passion or they are animal lovers themselves and hence want to support. So figuring out what that personal trigger is would be extremely essential and understand and appeal to that. Please understand the third most important thing is these are very smart individuals and they are going to be extremely sharp on numbers and attention to detail. So your financial transparency, the numbers, the cost per unit, what is your programmatic cost vis-a-vis your overheads or institution building cost, you have to have those numbers on the tip of your hands. They are happy to support programs, like I mentioned earlier, overheads as well as institution building or unrestricted funding, as you might want to call it, for certain institutional capacities or for using it on programs. But you have to be slow. You have to provide a reasonable explanation as to why are you seeking that support and what will be the end outcome of it, even if it is for furthering the mission of the organization, which is why you normally want to see flexible or unrestricted funding. You have to have clear vision and goals for what do you plan to achieve as an organization, say 3 years from now or 5 years from now, if you're planning to use that vis-a-vis for programmatic support. They do appreciate timely responses, follow-ups. So please don't hesitate to follow up. Yes, there's a reasonable number. So general rule of thumb is if you've had a meeting, say thank you as well as do a follow-up at least 2 or 3 times before you hear a yes or a no type of thing. So it's important to do that follow-up and not forget about it. The other thing is you have to be patient. So while giving is a priority, and I'm sure that you have seen even with the CSR folks, but here the giving is a priority, but yet it will feature at the bottom of other priorities. So you have to be patient. And also, it's not a transactional relationship, right? I mean, you have to ensure that you once the donor, once he or she becomes a donor, there is a trust and relationship that is built and strengthened, and eventually you can foresee that this person will become a champion of your cause, will buy into your mission, and hopefully be a potential fundraiser for you. So this is the mindset with which you have to actually approach an HNI donor. And yeah, and the key point or takeaway here is that you will have to mix in some amount of flexible, unrestricted funding with programmatic funding. It cannot be solely as you tap into this base of 3 to 50 lakhs given. Yeah. So moving on to the next basic question of what do HNIs look for when they decide or think about giving? And again, this is the last poll that I would like you guys to take and spend a minute on. Again, this is looking at more internally and what is required for you guys to, get the house in order before you even figure out where and how. Again, very interesting answers here, and and we will share. So, bulk of you believe again that alignment of cost sector with their interests, followed by measurable outcomes on ground. So, from our experience, largely it is in a way all of the above, but as you begin your you want to build your base, it is the founder's passion and motivation that work with a lot of people, right? It is in a way kind of a spiral, right? I think your early supporters, your first 2 3 5 supporters that will come to you are going to be largely from people who know you, who trust you, and who have faith in you. And this is where you will have to build your own passion, your own story, and be clear on why are you doing what you're doing and what will it achieve, right? And which is where the theory of change or the operating model or your approach. Why are you different from 100 of others who are out there today, right? So which is where the fire in the belly, which is the passion, and a combination of head and heart along with it will go a long way to get your initial few donors. And trust me, this goes not just with the initial donors, but for your subsequent donor set as well. The passion should be evident, and the story of why you started, why are you here, what is it that you are looking to bring about as a change on ground, right, is going to be extremely, extremely important as you get those first few donors in your kitty. Now, once you have those few people, you need to reciprocate that first. The trust and faith that they have entrusted in you to begin that journey with your capabilities and demonstrate those outcomes on ground and build a culture of good governance accordingly with that. Again, all of this will come along as you start engaging with few people. But if you already have certain demonstrated outcomes on ground, yes, please do share it, because I think as you start to go out there and tell your fundraising story or your own story about what motivated you to start or do what you're doing, and how has it demonstrated those parameters, it's important to showcase that you have an M&E system in place, you do track the metrics, you have a credible board in place, and you are very transparent about your accounting and financials. but people back people at the end of the day, and hence your passion and the genuineness should come through in whatever you're trying to say with the story. So effective communication and storytelling is important with these kind of parameters into it as well. Now, what else do you know? This is what the HNIs look for, right? But from your end, what would be very important, honestly, and I'm not kidding when I tell you that when we work with few NGOs and they come to us and ask us, what is it that will help build our HNI strategy? The first commitment we ask of them is their senior leadership time. Without which, because at the end of the day, these are people who are, like I mentioned, professionals with their own standing, and they would like to interact with the CEO of the NGO or the senior leadership of the NGO. This is not a task that can be outsourced to a fundraising resource that you might have. Yes, you will need that person's help for a follow through, but a commitment of at least 15% of senior leadership time to begin with, as you build and your donor base and you strengthen that HNI donor base, is it going to be extremely important. The second thing that you require is a very, very high quality pitch with an extremely clear ask, which is again, is something that a lot of different people offer as capacity building sessions. And I would strongly encourage you guys to take it up, because you will have, say, half an hour for a meeting with this particular individual, and you need to make the most of it. And it's important that your pitch is extremely clear as to what is it that you are trying to achieve. What is your objective? What are you seeking funding for? So that crafting of the ask is going to be extremely important, and what is it that you communicate. This is again, if you have somebody with a, who is a credible champion who espouses your cause on a board, or on your board, or is a current donor, it adds to the value. But if not, we will tell how you can go about building that as well. And this is as you want to subsequently build or grow your HNI network, is continuous engagement with the existing donors. And we'll touch base and come to that part slowly as well. Now, the burning question, I'm sure, in all your minds is, okay, I understand, what do the HNIs look out for? And I have it already. Now, where are these folks, right? Well, you don't have to look too far. You have to first start with your own house and slowly start peeling that onion in a way, right? So start inside out. I think if your own board or your current set of donors, who have the potential to give today, are not giving to their full potential and supporting you in your endeavors, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to step outside and see that kind of giving happening at that level from others. So you have to get one or two of your board members to honestly start supporting you and giving some amount that you feel is reasonable in terms of at a high level, at a high quality, so that when they talk about you or champion your cause, they are able to talk about it in a much more credible fashion. Because it's not just from the giving part of it, but it's also, these are the people who will introduce you to other donors as a starting point and to the wider community at large. So please do engage strongly with your board. And believe me, I mean, the board composition here, that is why plays a huge difference. And you need, if you don't have today, please see how you can build one or two people, in your advisory board or legal board, if possible, who support you, who can support you, and who believe in your cause, right? And that's where you start your engagement from. The second thing that you should ask of your board is, not just from a contribution and a connect perspective, yes, but also, if they are willing to pay for a fundraising resource, because that's another question that normally comes to people is, our donors themselves are not ready to pay for our own overheads. Where will we find money to hire a fundraising resource from? And this is where your board can collectively step in, perhaps to contribute to a fundraising resource, right? And referrals. So again, this is a very, very important thing, is this space works largely by warm reference. Cold calling is not going to work, unlike CSR. You will have to go via an access, a reference ideally, and starting with your board, donors, previous donors. You have to go not just, once you build that relationship a year or 2 years down the line, you can go back to them and ask them to connect you to 3 or 4 more people. And that's how you can grow your HNI network, which is where you have to move away from a very transactional mindset to a relationship building mindset and build a rapport with these folks. For the people who are looking at the UHNI segment as well, here, again, the way you can look at some of these is, of course, you can see whether your boards will have those UHNI networks that you can tap into to get a meeting. Otherwise, there are a lot of intermediaries such as Dasra, Satwa, who do work with some of the UHNIs and being in their database or speaking to them and seeking meetings with them to understand what are the personal giving preferences of some of those UHNIs will get you some insights. And from an access point of view, you probably have a higher probability if you get connected via people that know you better. For the HNI segments, you have your Living My Promise signatories, and you can tap into the social media, LinkedIn connects of even your current donors as well to prepare a longer list of database of where would these HNIs be. For the subsequent donors, essentially, you have to, this is kind of a 7-step approach. So once you have tapped into your own network first to build your initial few donor base, which is essentially your board or current donors who are, say, giving you 1 lakh today, but can they be engaged further to give you 3 lakhs? Or introduce you to people who can give 3 lakhs, right? Because again, they would be their peers. So once you have done that, how do you then go from starting off, starting to build that to grow that now further? Here, this is what we call as a 7-step approach, essentially from prospecting to creating champions for yourselves who can espouse the cause better, which is starting from research or prospecting stage to figuring out how and what will appeal to them, who would be the access point to reach out to them, and access via reference, right? And I think it's going to be very important because otherwise just pure cold calling is going to be extremely, extremely tough here. It's very rare that it will work or they will give you a meeting. So figuring out your access points here is going to be extremely essential. And once you get that meeting, building a rapport, a request and reporting is, and the engagement piece becomes very critical to then grow further your or expand further your the base in itself. So how do you get from that prospect to meeting and what does it take, right, to conversion in a way? So again, I'm just going to touch upon it, but it's essentially, first is once you have built that detailed long list of prospect in a way, which is culling out your LinkedIn, social media connects of the people that you know, starting with that, right, which is the access point. You then start with your board or current donors and figure out who knows who, right? And ask for, so the first way to start is, even before you get into this long list and all of that, go straight away and ask for introductions. I think people, if they espouse your cause, they will be happy to help you out, and trust me on that. Sometimes it's just our hesitancy to ask them for reference. But the best way this can also work is if you go with a list of people that they are connected with and present that list of 10 names to them and say, can you help me connect to 3 people from this list? That way the donor doesn't, or this person that you're asking for reference from doesn't have to rack his brain, or you don't give him or her the opportunity to say, let me think and come back. You have done the homework for this person and say, now, can you just, kind of go through this list and tell me 3 people or 5 people that you can help me connect with. We have seen in our experience that works far better and faster, kind of than to just go and say, can you tell me 2 people that you can make an introduction kind of thing. The second piece is, once you have an understanding that this person can give you this access, that person who referred you can also help help you understand what is the ability of this person to give, right? What is the level? Generally, we have seen if it's a peer, it's pretty much the same level of say a 3 lakh or a 5 lakh, and that is a good starting point for you to at least get your foot kind of the foot in the door kind of a thing. And they will also be able to tell you what would their preference be, and that's a conversation that you will have to strike up with them so that you know how to make or craft your appeal in a way, right? And the third is the affinity. And this is where you can again do your homework once you have the access as to what is the connection to the cause. Read up, do secondary research, figure out have they given in the space to other NGOs before? How are you different from the other NGOs that they have given in the past? And here, the objective is not to take away money, and you're not going to be taking away money from the other NGO to you or anything of that sort. I think it's more that they can expand the pool and they have the potential to give more, and that's what you have to tap into. So you have to know the right level to make that ask, and once you have that ask figured out, accordingly figure out what is it that you from your program can provide. Please do not be opportunistic and say that yes, we can carve out a project for you because that particular donor wants you to support for that particular program, or carve out a new program altogether. The donors are completely okay with saying that no, this is this may not work. Of course, communication, the way you communicate will be important, but don't carve out a separate program altogether for a particular donor just because he's ready to give you 3 or 5 lakhs. Now, once you have hopefully made that conversion, how do you engage further? Because you have to, your goal should be to make them champions. And like you've seen, you don't have to go through that 3-step process, which actually takes a long time with with respect to the acquisition phase, as they call it in business parlance, is a lot more than the farming phase, which is actually the engaging and building champions out. It's far more easier for you to engage a particular donor or a board member that you have and go back to them with asking for reference and making them a champion of your cause, rather than starting with the prospect stage each time. And the best way to grow your HNI network is this way, where you don't spend too much time in prospecting unless you have a complete strategic shift and you want to scale up, say, suddenly scale up to 10 times, or you're going to a new geography altogether to scale up your work, which is very different. But if it's more programmatic, support, and you want to scale your work in a particular geographical area, then it's better to engage and go back to your own reference every time. So what are the key things? Make them buy into your mission. Tie your ask to outcomes. So you have to, while they will give you initially on trust and faith and some belief in the work, you have to demonstrate that work to them and report back to them. Engage with them, get them to visit, right? Especially because you here are directly dealing with the individual, ask them about their family, get them to visit with their family, with their children. And send personalized periodic email updates. Don't just do newsletters, right? If they have not come to visit, can you take a video or a picture and send it to them communicate it to them in a very customized and personalized fashion. Again, very important, communicate. If your project is going to be delayed or at risk because of something, it's important to let them know. They are not going to withdraw funding. They do understand the challenges that NGOs have on ground. And like I said, they are extremely smart people, and they would prefer if you communicate it proactively rather than going back to them at the end of the year and saying that, we couldn't achieve these outcomes because of XYZ reason. Right? And seek in-person meetings at least 2 times a year. From your end, you have to see. They may not give you, they may not have the time, but I think it's important for you to reach out and seek that meeting. Okay, if not an in-person meeting, I think technology, COVID has shown us today how technology can be useful, and you can do Zoom calls with them. Try to see if you are able to, depending of course on your program and work, whether you're able to make them interact with few beneficiaries directly over videos, or inviting them for the projects. And come out as a thought leader as well in this space. So do send them sector updates, not just your own programmatic updates, but even if it's once in 6 months or in a year, let them know what else is happening in this space. So that you come out as a thought leader, not just focused on your operations and your NGO, but the feeling that the purpose or the mission is larger than the organization today. And I think that's going to be very, very important to build that relationship. So now I'll hand this over to Manisha, my colleague and co-founder, to walk you through two interesting case studies of one building from the base, and the second is how did that grow. So Manisha, over to you. Sorry.
Thanks, Deepa. So I hope this the entire background about HNI fundraising, who they are, how to reach them, I'm sure it's very helpful for you, all of you. But now, just to convert what we've heard in theory into a practical term, basically, as Deepa said, we've chosen two case studies. And we've chosen two organizations that essentially are operating in the sectors that are very difficult to work in, because one is an animal welfare, and that too they work on policy related aspects. So it is not something which is much heard of. People are not really very familiar with work done in policies for animals. The other case study that we are going to talk about today is for a policy and research organization. Again, something which is not very a cause which is not very easy for people to give to, because the impact is very difficult to be seen in a limited period of time. So let's jump into those. So first one is an organization which decided to build the HNI fundraising right from ground up. And why did they have to do that? So just a little bit about the organization. So they started out, I mean, it's an international animal welfare organization. They started their India operations about 8 to 10 years back, and eventually grew the operations in India, so that they are now supporting other country operations as well. So they are supporting smaller operations or offices in Nepal and Bhutan, Singapore, other neighboring countries of India. They actually have been supported by their parent company in the US. And the work that they are doing basically is, of course, different areas related to animal welfare, but the focus is not really on rescue or shelter homes. It is more on policy related work. It is more on capacity building of law enforcing agencies to ensure that animal cruelty is stopped. What are the various policies that can really make lives of the animal better in different sectors, in different, I mean, be them farm animals or wildlife trade, or it could be factory farming. So multiple things. And as you can really appreciate that, not a very easy, I would say, sector or initiative for which to raise funds from. So they were raising funds from Indian donors, but those were limited to some kind of disaster response related funding. So whenever there would be disaster, there would be animals in danger, they would definitely do crowdfunding, and they would be able to attract some amount of funding, but that was very limited, and it certainly would not fulfill the requirement for the policy related work or the research related work that they were doing. So they decided to uh, they had a strategy discussion, and they were very sure that they have to start looking at HNI fundraising, because again, CSR was something that they were very sure that they would not really be able to attract. So how did they do it? It was a very difficult task to do indeed. So they decided to start with a team of two fundraisers. One was a senior resource and one was a junior resource. And the idea was to create a complete database of prospective donors. And where did they get those donors from? So the research included, going through organizations which were generally research organizations and not essentially only animal welfare organizations. So they did actually go through the organizations that were in governance, that were in research, that were in various policy interventions, and just tried to get an understanding of who are those people or who are those foundations that are funding these kind of causes. So they had a bigger list of, prospective donors, foundations prepared. In addition to that, they also looked and read about current donors, individuals, as well as, I mean, both UHNIs as well as HNIs, who were passionate about animals, who were animal lovers, known to be animal lovers, some kind of film personalities also who had openly talked about their love for animals, and they had promoted some of these causes. So they made a long list, and it took them some time, but at the same time, the same team also worked on creating material that was very catchy. It was just a two-page kind of a flyer with a very, very clear ask. And what I feel is that is very important because okay, somebody's asking about a clear ask. So what is a clear ask? So typically what happens is, what we've really seen is, when people ask for donation, they don't ask from the position of authority. It is not really a favor that the donors are doing, right? I mean, they want to give back. It's their need as well. And you are the ones who are doing that great work on the ground. You are the ones, because they cannot devote time, they cannot be in person participating in the work on ground, you are the one who are doing it. So basically, I don't think you need to ask from a position of inferiority. It has to be a position of superiority. You have to ask because you are the ones who are doing this work, right? And the ask has to be very clear. I mean, I have to say that I'm doing this work. The policy intervention, I mean, the research. So, for example, a white paper would need about 10 lakhs for per white paper. So the donor also is not very confused about what is it that you're doing and what is it that you're looking for. So it is not an information session or information material only. It is also material which will have to convey what you're looking for. What is your product? What is your services? What is going to be the outcome of that initiative or intervention that you're going to do? And what is it therefore that you're expecting from the donor? What is it that you want them to do? So that is what I mean by clear ask. So they actually took a fresh look at all the presentation material that they had, created a very crisp kind of material, which is not very technical, but at the same time easy for people to understand, captures what exactly are the services, what would they be doing, what is the impact that they would be really looking to achieve, and what would they expect the donor to do in terms of the financial contribution, or even the even otherwise, I mean, in terms of their networks or in terms of their other kind of support. So after doing that, they started approaching. But before, but who did they start? So as Deepa has said multiple times, I mean, you have to look within. You have to see whether, uh, can your board members themselves introduce you to a few people. Your board members are there because they identify and they, of course, understand and approve of your cause. And therefore, they should be the ones who should be able to make those initial connects. So they then started approaching from that big list of donors that they had created, prospects that they had created. They actually sat with their board members, sat with their partner NGOs who they were subgranting, trying to understand as to where is it that they can get their first reference from. Once that was done, it was decided that though they had a team of a senior and a junior level resource, the actual pitching would have to be done by the executive director because the passion would not be able to come through. And it is very, very important that the executive director also understands what is it that the prospective funders are looking for. So it was decided that the approach and the actual presentation would be done by the executive director. So that is something that the senior management has to be willing for. Even some of the meetings were done by the board members themselves as well. Typical time, the good thing about this kind of approach is that though it is not very, the success rate, what they found was about 20%. So for every 10 people that they approached, 2 of them ended up giving after an engagement of 3 to 6 months. But one good thing that we've really found with the HNI donor segment is that early on you come to know whether they are interested, they are not interested, and whether you there is any merit and in engaging with them further. So I think it is very important also to understand as to who are the people who do not resonate with your cause or do not are not likely to give to your cause, and that's okay because everybody has his or her own preferences. that they would like to give to. So even if somebody does not really seem, I mean, you don't get the feeling that the person is going to give to your cause, that's fine. But even if you've made the person understand your cause, I think the person can introduce you to somebody from his network, maybe going forward, who would be interested in the cause, in your cause. So what they really found out was the conversion time was anywhere between 3 to 6 months. And in that 3 to 6 months time period, so they actually decided to weed out the people early on, in the first, after the first couple of conversations, as to whether they would be interested, not interested, and decided to focus their energies only on the real prospective donors. I would say, to for somebody who started doing this exercise as a for the first time, 20% was quite a good success rate. The key learnings from this exercise. And again, Deepa had mentioned this earlier, but I'll just like to touch upon this, which they also found that don't start any new program and don't commit to start any new program because there is a possibility of funding. I mean, people, you may be doing 10 things, but then you'll always come across somebody who will say that, okay, we were interested in something else, the 11th thing. And there is a tendency that, okay, I'm going to get a new donor, so why don't I start a new program? Believe me, it is going to be difficult because you wouldn't know whether the person will continue for a longish period of time. And if you want to start a new program, it will be at the cost of one of your existing programs. So you're better off not doing that. Look into your kitchen. So when we are saying that you don't start any new programs, we're not saying that, don't just pay any heed to the request of the donors or the interest of the donors. I'm sure that you will find a way to maybe talk about your programs in different ways to your prospective donors. Just to give you an example, about the same NGO. Now, they were doing some policy work, and they were seeking funding for policy research work on factory farming of the animals, and how and the reasons as to why the factory farming should be stopped, whether it is factory farming of chicken or even the other animals, fish. So, I mean, very difficult for them to find those donors for this kind of work. So what they realized is, when they met a lot of donors, the interest typically was in the health, in the livelihood, in the environment. So what they realized is, I mean, there was a way for them to showcase the same work that they would be doing in a different light. So how would the work on policy related to factory farming would benefit people on ground, who are doing policy work? I mean, who are doing work in terms of employment opportunities, employment generation? Could they showcase that as work that would impact environment, as something that would impact health? Because the factory farm chicken were subjected to a lot of additional medicines and harmful substances to ensure that they don't die early, and then they're fattened in a quicker manner of time, that it is really harmful for the human health. So basically, they decided to showcase the same research that they were going to do in a different light. Started talking about their work that would affect positively the health and the environment and the employment related aspects of the humans. That actually helped them attract some kind of funding. So they managed to do that, turn around their pitch typically to suit the requirements of the funder, to in a way that would appeal to most of the funders. So therefore, it is always possible. I'll just give you another example, just to make the point very clear. Now, they were wanting to do some research on animal abuse that was happening in India, and they found that there was no data available on that. Again, very difficult to find donors for that kind of work. So what they realized is it has a very, very strong connection with mental health, because the people who actually abuse the animals at home are victims of some kind of mental health, and because the animals are very easy targets, they end up harming them. The next targets could be the kids at home, the wives at home, and therefore they manage to showcase their prospective research in that light, that they're doing this also. I mean, it will definitely help the animals, but it would also be able to talk about a different aspect of mental health. So can you do that? And I'm sure, depending on what your cause is, there is a way of showcasing your work. Not really not really saying that, not really hiding what you're going to do, but also showcasing maybe the other areas that your work is really going to impact. Third and most important learning was focus, focus, and more focus. It could be very, very frustrating in the initial three months period when you're going through this entire exercise of doing this database, finding out who to approach, trying various ways in which you could approach them. Some things may materialize, some things may not materialize. You may get a few rejects. So it could be very frustrating, but at the same time, it is very important to not lose that focus and to be at it. I think once you've cracked the first couple of HNI donors, I think the journey from there then on is not going to be as difficult because you've already done it. You already know what it takes. Um, so this was about the organization that really built the HNI fundraising from ground up. We'd like to talk about the second part of the story in a way. An organization, Deepa, can we go to the next one? Yeah. An organization which was already doing some HNI fundraising, but they felt the need to grow on their existing HNI database. Again, this is an organization which is a research think tank based out of India, but working more on policy consulting in three areas, essentially education, livelihood, and governance. But the work is mainly focused on, they do a little bit of small pilots on ground to showcase the research works or their just proof of their research, but the major work happens, 90% of the work happens in research and policy related aspects. That built a team of around 40 people, and the organization is, the budget is about 6 crores. There is some question here, so maybe I'll take it later. But they were a little lucky in the sense that they, again, they found it very difficult to raise funds from individual donors, CSR. They realized that the foundations, UHNIs and HNIs were the only people who they could really approach for getting funding for their kind of cause. They had cracked a few HNI funding, HNI donors, but initially when we started interacting with them, we realized that it was about just 15% of their entire donation pool or their financial budget. Now they really felt, and they had a lot of international donors. So they were very wary about the fact that they are heavily dependent on international foundations, and they wanted to make conscious effort to move away from international funding to more of indigenous funding, and better still through HNIs rather than foundations. So how did they go about it? Deepa, can we go to the next one? Okay, so here they didn't really have to do the material parts and just going through their pitch and all that. All that was done because they already had a couple of HNI donors and family foundations with whom they were engaged. What they realized is here engagement is so important. It's very important to keep in touch with your existing donors to be able to groom them further into your continuous supporters. So therefore, they decided to have a 2-people team on board. 2-people team dedicated to fundraising efforts. And what they have realized, and after a lot of trial and errors, different things, what they have realized is 40, 50, 10 works. And what is 40, 50, 10? 40 is, both these people, they spend 40% of the time looking for new donors. So all their new research, looking at different databases, looking at different organizations, different people who are doing different kind of work. So all that research, including research, approaching these new people, making presentations, sending material to different people, all that takes not more than 40%. Then major chunk of time, 50%, is for engagement with the existing donors. And this is so very important because, we may feel otherwise, right? We may feel that now they're there, they've already started supporting you, so maybe engagement with them could just be about 10 to 20%. But on the contrary, it is very essential to ensure that they continue to support you. B, can they be groomed into not only your continuous donors, but your extended fundraising people. Because they are the ones who have bought into your story. They are the ones who understand your work. Can they be your can they be the people who can talk about, who would talk about your work in their own networks rather than you going and talking to them. So that they found is very, very efficient and important, because it is not, because I mean, hearing from your peers is always better than hearing from a third entity like an NGO. And the last 10% is for the events. So the team participates. So it could be their annual event that they host for all their existing donors as well as their prospective donors, or they go and participate in various other donors. So that occupies about 10% of their time. So that they found was a good way of for these two people to spend their time on. Again, very important to highlight the support of the senior management. So all their board members, I'm not even talking about the executive director, I'm talking about the board members. So all of them agreed to spend on an average a half a day per week. Now it could be spent in various ways. It could be spent in, like going for and attending some kind of seminar, some kind of meeting, talking about it, being on some panel, different ways, or even actually introducing you to somebody else. But I mean, board members, out of them, of course, they found that out of the board that they had, a couple of them, at least three of them were more willing to be engaged. And those were the ones who were spending about half a day per week. The methodology, again, no cold calling, only personal networks, referrals, their annual dinners, in which they would request their existing donors to request their friends to come and get one friend along type of invitation they would try. And they also tried for various presentations or speaking slots in various events and forums. So that is the way they actually managed to enhance and expand their network and make that impact and move finally to a position wherein today 60% of their funding out of the 6 crore comes from HNIs, and remaining 40% comes from international foundations or Indian foundations. So what were the key learnings here? What is this PQR? PQR is the name of the organization. We don't really want to talk about, just to not reveal their identity, because we've not really checked with them. Okay, so key learnings. The geometric progression works. So when you have your first couple of donors, you have one donor who buys into your work, he will introduce you to two more people. If you have two more people on board, they will introduce you to two more people each. So it is essentially geometric progression. So what you really need to do is you really need to spend a lot of efforts and energies into getting a few strong buyers. Continuous engagement, and I have highlighted that enough and more. 50% of the time of the team spent on ensuring the ensuring that they were in touch with these donors, and by multiple ways. Basically, as Deepa said, that it could be an invitation to an event. It could be some kind of sector report, some kind of policy, newer policy. Related news that they would want to share. So multiple ways, going and meeting them in person as well. And most importantly, your donors, you don't have to then think that you're two people or one person team which is doing fundraising. Your donors essentially can become your extended fundraising team members. So I think these may give you some tips, some ideas about how do you really go about fundraising, starting from scratch and also growing on your existing database. We have another slide which really talks about a few parameters, but I think it will be important for us to answer your questions. So maybe we can just skip that.
Yeah. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Deepa, for the detailed session. Yeah, founder and CEO of DanaMojo, Mr. Dhaval Udani, has a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Dhaval, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Manisha and Deepa, for this lovely session enlightening our NGOs about HNI fundraising. Many of them were asking for it, and I'm sure that they would have some takeaways from this. So first of all, I will ask you some questions, and then we'll open it to the floor to also ask some questions from them directly. In the meanwhile, if anyone has questions that you would like Deepa and Manisha to address and me to ask them, please put it in the chat box, and we can, we'll do that. So one thing I wanted to actually share with everyone before we get into this question is, Deepa mentioned about positioning the NGO, Deepa and Manisha both, in terms of saying, how can you, they said that don't start a new program, but they said, look into your kitchen. So how can you take something which is already there, and how can you position it very interestingly for an NGO? And with that in mind, I actually wanted to give an example of one of the organizations which works in the with mentally challenged children. Again, mentally challenged space is a very difficult space. Many of you all have said, how do we raise money for it? And the founder of that organization used to go to CSR and realize that while there's no space for mentally challenged, CSR wanted to give for livelihoods and wanted to give for education. And in reality, what this organization was doing was building skills for children as well as giving them education. So instead of positioning it as, providing support for mentally challenged, she changed it around and said, hey, why don't you provide education support? And by the way, our beneficiaries are mentally challenged, right? So I think twisting that story around, and creating your story to suit the audience, a very, very important thing they've given an example of. So I have some questions which I've also taken from some of the chat questions that have come about. So first question is, can you give some guidelines to an NGO on how they can classify a donor as an HNI donor or not an HNI donor? Maybe based on size of the organization or any other kind of metric or any other kind of way.
Okay.
So I'll begin perhaps, and then maybe Manisha can add in. So I think one of the key things for you to focus on as an organization is if your org budget, so there are two ways in which you can quantify. One is based on the size of your organization, as well as the time that you're willing to invest and spend on this particular person. Right. And I think as you begin your work on ground with a new idea or initiative, you actually want to focus a lot more on the ground level and make sure that your program or idea works. So at that point in time, your HNI donor or an anchor donor is what you would be looking for. And perhaps level, maybe a 5 lakh, and your budget would be probably around most of your time. It's quite possible that you would have bootstrapped initially and all of that. So the second, so this is where, based on the budget of your organization, you have to be cognizant that it is at least probably 10% or 20% in terms of the quantum to qualify as an HNI donor. And also, it's a very important thing. While as you start, probably you will find that, and there are lots of foundations, incubators today, institutions today who offer, a large sum of money. While it's okay to start off with that, it's also in your best interest from a long-term point of view to not be reliant of from a single HNI donor of not more than 20% of your budget coming in from that donor. So keeping that in mind, it's better for you to diversify that slowly, while in the beginning you may be okay taking a higher amount as well. The second is for much more smaller NGOs, and this is more to the 50,000 to 1 lakh people who actually kind of polled there. I would suggest, I would rather request you guys to actually focus more on retail on that front. Because a donor who is giving you 50,000, unless it's coming in voluntarily and you don't have to spend much of your time engaging with that donor, or if the potential to give that kind of money, which they may start at 50,000, but you feel this person is a CXO at a MNC and probably is earning 50 lakhs to a crore per annum and can maybe step up to give 3 lakhs or 5 lakhs, then it makes sense for you to engage and invest time. But if you feel nahi, ye 50,000 ya 1 lakh or between 50,000 to 1 lakh, it's not going to go beyond that, then I would say just keep the donor engaged with periodic updates, but don't spend too much time on from that point of view. Manisha, in case you want to add anything further to it.
No, I think you've covered it all. So maybe we'll take the next one.
So maybe I'll pick one question from.
Unless Dhaval wants to ask anything, any specific thing.
Yeah. So Manisha, I'm mindful of your time. I know you have a hard stop at 12:15. So we'll probably just go through a couple of questions, and you can step out as you see appropriate.
Sure.
So amount-wise, like you said, you've told us about the amount. Now this is very similar to CSR. And most NGOs, again, in the poll also said that effort-wise and reporting-wise, they feel it is lesser than CSR. Can you further share what is similar and different with respect to CSR funding as well as foundation or institutional funding? I think if maybe some 2-3 points, if you can tell the audience on what is similar and what is different, I think it may be helpful.
Sure. So it is similar and it is at the same time very different, because CSR funding, of course, I mean, the amounts could completely vary. So CSR funding could be, you could compare that with the UHNI funding as well. But if you take an amount about, say, about 5 lakhs, the kind of efforts that you will need to put in are maybe completely different. In case of CSR, you may have to go through multiple layers, and you may never end up meeting the person who's actually making the decision, right? Again, it could be very, very focused on programs, and it could, I mean, even going forward, I mean, you wouldn't know whether, they would be willing to shift towards capacity building or organization building kind of funding. That is one. At the same time, the amount of reporting that you may have to do could be completely different. You may have to actually invest a lot of time in creating reports for them. Another thing could be, if it depends on the relationship. Your relationship, the person may just move on. The person with whom you are working at the CSR, at this particular organization, the CSR contact, that person may move on. Also, the decision-making time, that could be another important factor that could completely vary. You may or may not hear from them quickly. But on the contrary, when you're working with the HNIs, I mean, as I said earlier as well, since you're meeting the person who's giving his or her own personal money, it is very easy to make out whether the person is bought on or sold on or not, whether the person is likely to fund or not, and therefore weeding out and deciding whether you really need to invest further in terms of your time. That decision can be taken quite quickly, quite early on. That is one thing. Second is even the reporting. I mean, they're very flexible in a way. I mean, tomorrow, if your organization has run into some issues with respect to that program, some other variables have come up, it's very easy then for you to go approach them and seek their permission or get them to understand why you may have to alter the program. Also, continuous support, engagement, these are completely different from CSR to HNI. So though both of them have their own merits, I think HNI fundraising definitely is beneficial from that perspective. About the size of funding, basically foundations, Dhaval, you asked. Now foundations could be a completely different thing, and they could be more like CSR. I mean, UHNIs have their own foundations, and they could be very specific about the causes that they want to give for. And there could be a process, well laid out process, which again could be very similar to the CSR, that you may have to apply, you may have to submit the proposal, they may ask you for coming and presenting. So all those could be very, very similar in terms of CSR. Deepa, anything from your side? You're on mute.
You've covered pretty much.
Okay, great. So one of the questions that is there is, do HNIs also fund system change interventions?
They do.
We'll ask either of you all to respond to that.
Yes, they do. And it completely depends on what stage they are at. I would say that if somebody is really starting out fresh and wants to understand the sector more, wants to learn in the process, it is less likely that they will invest for systemic changes. But if somebody has been around for a long time, has understood, has realized what his or her passion is, and understands the needs for the systemic changes, I think it is easy for them to then start giving towards systemic changes. And we have seen that curve. So I think like all of us, even the HNIs will have their own learning curve, wherein they will start pretty much at the programmatic level, and then they will move on pretty much, and in fact, that is one thing that we keep on doing at Praviti, we actually keep on advocating about, the need for this kind of capital to go towards capacity building or systemic change or policy or research kind of work. So definitely yes, but completely depends on the stage at which they are.
Okay, great. So another thing that a lot of NGOs encounter is that many times HNIs are willing to provide some contact details of people, of other HNIs, but they're not willing to introduce them. They're not willing to write that mail or in any other form of introductions. What do you think NGOs should do in such cases, and how can they convince the HNIs to introduce more warmly?
Okay. Okay, there can be different ways. Maybe they are not very comfortable writing that mail because they wouldn't know whether they would, their connects would really resonate with the cause. But a couple of things that we have actually experimented and have found to be working very well is, just ask them, request them to call their friends or colleagues or connects for some kind of high tea or small gathering, wherein you also call the NGO, and the NGO then, the HNI himself or herself talks about why he or she is supporting the organization, and then the organization can just add on top of that. So it becomes sort of a gathering wherein you get an opportunity also to talk about your work, but at the same time the people in that gathering have an option of deciding whether they want to take that conversation forward or not. So it becomes little less, I think, problematic, if I can use that word, for the HNIs to, instead of giving the contacts, it's easier that way. So you can try different things.
And also maybe go with the list as well, right? I think one of the other things that I also mentioned in the presentation session is sometimes they don't want to rack their brains and think about it separately. They would be willing to do that if, say, you go with a small template of just making an introduction rather than a specific ask of sorts, right? Which is where the hesitancy typically comes in, is when the language is more around, support this NGO, rather than saying, this is an interesting NGO that I have been supporting, and they would hugely benefit from an interaction with you. So make the language perhaps a little bit more general when you ask for reference, more as an introduction to hear you out. And if this, and the person normally is warm to make that kind of introduction than a specific saying, you should look at this guy, these people for supporting, and go with the list. Do your homework and see, whether some of the connects resonate with him. And when he or she will look at the name, they'll know, yes, I think I can make an introduction to this person, and that's all you want.
Great. So one of the things I often tell our NGOs about HNIs is that they should be also looking to increase that amount over a period of time. And back when we were at Give India, that we would aim to increase HNI donations from 5 lakhs in the first year to about 25 lakhs by the third year. And most people find that very incredulous. And you guys have been at the forefront of actually managing that relationship. And I know we've gotten it. Obviously, we've not gotten it with all donors, but we've gotten out there with some of them. So can you tell us about that secret sauce on how do you make that happen?
Okay, so I need to go, so I'll just drop off. And thanks a lot, Dhaval, for this opportunity to connect with your interesting NGOs.
Thanks a lot, Manisha.
Yeah.
Thanks, Manisha.
So Coming to the question around how do you increase essentially the ask, or slowly gradually build the amount of ask from a donor that is already engaged with you. There are multiple ways to do it. So like essentially one of the questions, and I would like to tie it up with what was asked on chat as to the how do you present outcomes to the donor, right? And so that is something for a 3 lakh donor. I think the specific question by Vishal was. So here, I think the trick, or the thought process should ideally be in terms of how do I break down my organization level outcomes. Hopefully, all of you, as you work with on the ground, you also envision whatever you're doing is actually resulting in certain change on ground. And how do you track that? It could be purely in terms of outreach to begin with, right? It should be a pure an outreach number, that X number of beneficiaries have been touched or reached out, direct and indirect. The second is in terms of specific, whether, say, for an example, an education-related organization or a health-related organization. You can also have certain parameters that you can that you would track internally to say that whether the change on the ground is effective or not. Certain things are easier, so livelihood, education, health. I think it's easy to show, especially grassroots-related work, the parameters of change that is required. And that is how you actually try to draw in from an organization level outcome. What will it take for me to achieve that outcome, which is essentially the budget, right? And what is that cost per unit that you will arrive at essentially? And based on that cost per unit, you can say, okay, agar, if I have to make this kind of change for one beneficiary, my cost is 10,000 rupees or X number. For a 3 lakh amount of support, what will that look like? How many beneficiaries will I reach out to? What is that incremental change that will be seen, say, this grade level, based learning that this particular set of children have achieved. So improvement in learning outcomes, improvement in health outcomes, and those are the actual outcomes. And how are you tracking it? How are you measuring it is also equally important. It's not anecdotal, but actually done by some data in a data-driven manner, right? And showcasing that to the donor upfront and managing this expectation upfront is very important, so that they don't think that 3 lakh with a 3 or 5 lakh donation you're going to achieve the stars, but more in terms of saying, this is what your 3 lakh will do. This is how we are planning to use that 3 lakh. And this is what you will see in terms of outreach, in terms of improvement in health, education outcomes, or say number of placements that can be done, etc. And Manisha gave you an example of similarly for a research paper or a white paper. So which is where the crafting the ask is very important to see what is the outcome or deliverable that you will be able to achieve, and hence what is the cost, and this is what the donor will be getting. Now, coming to Dhaval's question around how do you increase that or make that donor change on that front. Again, very important first and foremost to deliver on what has already been promised to that donor. And after, generally we have seen the fatigue in a way start setting in at around 3 years or so, when after supporting the same set of beneficiaries and you have been engaging that donor well, how do you say what more the donor can do? And that's where you kind of say that, okay, now as an organization, they believe in us. Can I go to them and ask them and share what my challenges are, which could be in terms of, I need to build my technology, better technology, better M&E practice. And that's where you start getting them to fund for your organization or mission rather than programmatic. And it is a gradual process, but we have seen it happen. And no, it does not take away from your programmatic funding, but it helps you leverage further. So they do, because their income levels also increase gradually. And even if you take a 7 or 8, 10% inflation rate, they can also support that and actually start carving out projects which are more organization specific that you can ask them to support for. That's
Great. Thanks, Deepa, and thanks for taking that question from the chat as well and responding to that. I think I have one last question from my end, and then we'll open it out to the rest of the audience. So many times NGOs feel that their particular cause is very difficult, and it's impossible to get money for it, right? I see that everyone finds their own cause very difficult, and some other cause a lot more easy to do. So, what advice would you have for such organizations who find their cause very difficult to sell? And have you seen HNIs pick difficult causes?
Every cause matters, right? I think I'll mention that very clearly. Every cause matters, and every NGO has its own struggle to do this and build this in a way. But what is extremely critical, which is where, and you've seen the pool, right? I mean, I think we have a large number of HNIs that you can tap into, but at the same time, be smart. I mean, you have to diversify your sources of funding and make sure you just don't get into a silo of being overly dependent only on HNIs or CSRs, but also do retail and multiple others. So you have a good portfolio mix in a way of various sources of funding. Now, coming to the specific question on the difficult cause, yes and no. So there are causes where it is very visible. The outcomes are very tangible, like the examples that I took earlier, which is around education or health or livelihood, skilling kind of thing, where you can demonstrate outcomes on ground and tangible, are generally picked more easily by HNIs. So I will not deny that. Where you're able to demonstrate tangible outcomes on ground in a specific time frame or period of time. The reforms, the policy advocacy work at the same time that Manisha kind of, and that was the reason we specifically took those examples to demonstrate that even if you're not purely grassroots, but you are, working at a policy level or a governance level, you will find HNIs, yes, but on the higher end spectrum, which is people who have the ability to give 25 lakhs plus, are people who understand what it takes. And there you need to demonstrate more on the, it's a high risk, but a higher return on investment in a way. So they are the people who are willing to take those risks. And here, where what we have seen is these are generally professionals, if you're looking at the pure HNI segment and not the ultra high net worth segment. It's also the kind of work that these people do, which are typically, they say, a PVC firm is known to take bets, right? And they will invest in multiple opportunities and see which one works, and they are looking at bigger bang for buck. And here, this is where you have to explain that, it affects all, especially take a cause of governance. It affects all. And if something works better, if the decision makers out there, which are MPs, MLAs, or even at a local panchayat level, if those people can take better decisions, and as government, who else has the largest pool of funding today? So it's the way you showcase the cause is going to be extremely important. Showcase, get your passion, why are you in this space? You should be able to answer that very clearly. Why did you choose to be in the difficult space? If it's a personal story, share that personal story, right? And nothing connects more than that. And then see what is it that as an outcome, or what is your vision of the organization. And trust me, if it is strong enough, people will connect. And there are people who do support. We have seen people supporting causes of intellectual disability, mental health like depression, bipolar, or even prison reforms, or general governance piece, including media in some cases. So it really varies on what appeals, and you have to connect to that.
Great. So I think we'll open it out now to the audience, and Namita, if you can
Sure.
unmute
Yeah,
respectively.
I am going to steal 2 minutes over here, just sending out the feedback link. I really want to know from the participants what did they feel about the webinar, so that it gives us an insight of what you are looking for. Are these webinars making any difference with your work? Please fill this feedback, and we will give 2 minutes for that, and then we'll jump on to the next question. Um, Bhagyashree, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Namita. Good afternoon. This is Bhagyashree from Pyjam Foundation. We're a fairly small organization based out of Pune. And I have a question and a sub-question that's part of that. I think the first question I wanted to ask was around the funnel or the conversion sort of that happens with HNIs in terms of, like we said, there are certain ones that fund from the 5 to 50,000 to 1 lakh, and then certain ones who fund slightly more. So what would be an ideal mix for us to pursue in terms of, should we be trying to reach out to a lot of the ones that are giving smaller sizes but are more likely to convert, or should we be aiming for a few that are going to be giving more and try to aim for that mix of the ticket sizes, basically I'm talking about. And what would that funnel look like? So if we reach out to 5, 1 in 5 may convert, which was the number you gave in the case study. What would that look like for other? For example, we work in education in Pune, so what might be the number there? And the other sort of sub question is, for those that decline to fund or we find are not interested, HNIs, what can we do with those, like without letting go of all of the time spent, like the 40-50 split, so the 40 that was spent pursuing them, without allowing all of that to go to waste? So how can we keep connected, or what is a good way to keep them engaged and ask for something else? So this is my broad question.
Okay, so I think there are 3 questions in here. So the first question on the the ticket sizes piece, honestly, Bhagyashree, I think you have to do what is appropriate and right for your organization at this stage, right? Because honestly, there's no right or wrong answer here. You have to figure out for yourself what is working for you. Try out both tracks, different ticket sizes, as because you're a small NGO today. Because at the end of the day, you would also need money in your kitty, right? So start with that, figure out what is working, where are you able to develop. I mean, if it's a quicker conversion, great. The other option you could try, which a lot of people have tried, is you could create one project worth 5 lakh, right? But if you're able to unitize those, say, like I said, if there is a cost per unit of 10,000, are you able to pitch the same project in a giving circle kind of a format? Some people have tried that in the past, where the time investment is slightly lesser, but you're able to say create or build a pool of 10 people coming in together who are giving 50,000, or 5 people coming in together who are giving you 1 lakh kind of a thing. But your reporting on that becomes easier, because now you, instead of reporting to each single person, you can send one single report to 5 people and engage them further as well. So you could consider that for your smaller ticket sizes in a way, and see if it works, right? And also we have noticed that people tend to give, if there is gap funding, more easily when they know that there are other of their peers or who are supporting this project in this way. They tend to be more comfortable, because in a way, probably in their heads, they feel that they are hedging the risk, and or are being part of something larger, and everybody likes to be part of a community that is doing the same thing. So that is one option that you could try for your ticket size kind of thing. Now, in your conversion rate, the general rule of thumb we have seen is 1:5 across the board. But having said that, I would like to caveat it there by saying that it also depends on how hot or cold that connect is, right? So if it's your immediate board member or a person today that is giving you 50,000 rupees, knows you well, or has been a volunteer with someone, I think Deepti had raised that you have a bunch of volunteers that are there. If they have known you well, and if they are able to connect you to someone by strongly saying a strong word of reference, the conversion there becomes almost like 1:3 or 1:2. Because the first aim is to get a meeting. So to get a meeting in itself, you have to meet 5 people or 3 people, again, depending on how hot or cold your connect is. But what we've seen is once you get into a meeting, if the connect to the cause is there, you're able to talk to them properly about, structure the conversation in a way where it's very clear what your operating model is, what your background is, why are you doing what you're doing, what will you be able to demonstrate on ground, and what is the ask, right? What are you expecting out of that? If those things are clear, we have seen a conversion of 1:3 when a meeting happens. If you're able to get them to visit you, it's 100% conversion normally. So that's the way it kind of progresses. But again, it's trial and error depending on how are you connected. So there are a lot of factors that make that conversion also happen. And the best case scenario, which we said is 1:4 or 1:5, when your referral is warm. So if it's hot, it can be even quicker, 1:2 or 1:3. I think the third question was around if there is a donor who says no to you. I think first and foremost, try and understand why have they said no? Is it because they are supporting someone else? And I think again, Deepti or someone had that question on conflict, right? With respect to saying that, are they supporting other NGOs and hence they are saying no to you? Which is fine. I think try and understand if that has been the case, right? Or understand, is it not appealing to them? Do they find that you have not given them enough information? So find out the cause for that no, and trust me, they appreciate that when you feel that there's a lukewarm interest or the interest is minimal. And when you leave the meeting, at least have that understanding of why have they said no? Is there a follow-up opportunity possible by saying that you can get back to them? Or is it, and be okay with saying that, okay, this person is maybe not interested or is not in the right stage of, from a giving perspective at this point. So let us not invest any more effort in them, right? And put them in your newsletter. Of course, say a thank you mail and send them whatever you can. And once a quarter or once in 6 months, make sure you send something to them about your organization or program or challenges or an annual report, at least, if nothing else, once a year. So that would be my suggestion on that.
Yeah, thanks, Deepa. Deepti?
Yeah. Hi, Deepa. This is Deepti here from HNI Foundation. I had already posted my question. My point is that we have a lot of volunteers, almost about 2,000 volunteers coming from about 33 corporates, right? But two questions I have. One is, how can I leverage this to reach out to HNIs? I mean, people who can contribute more than 1 lakh and things like that. Two, my volunteers themselves, we have a lot of crowdfunding campaigns running on Give India and all that, and they contribute 500,000 and all that. How can I make them regular contributors? Because if all of them themselves contribute 500, that's a huge donation that my organization gets. But there are a lot of our volunteers we know give us their time, but we are not able to make them open up their pockets, right? It's like that. So how should we ask this? I'm sort of at a dead end over there.
On the latter part of the question, I think DanaMojo retail person is better equipped to handle.
Okay.
But on the first part, I can give you 1 or 2 suggestions which we have tried in the past, right? So what would be extremely useful, Deepti, is as a first step, probably you should segregate or classify these volunteers based on their positions. Are they junior level, mid-level, senior level in their respective organizations, right? Ideally, you should tap into the senior level or the mid-level people. Start with senior level, I would say. So assuming out of the 2,000, at least 5% is at a senior level position, hopefully, via the engagement, or they have come once in a while type thing. Go seek a meeting with them. And inform them more about the NGO, right? The way to engage them or kind of suggest to them is if they can create, talk to their peers or senior leaders and form like I said, a giving circle of sorts. And that idea has worked in multiple places in the past for us, where you actually get 10 or 5 of the senior leadership people. And these senior leadership people can easily give 1 to 3 lakhs of their money, right? Or go to the HR, can they make an introduction to the HR and say if vertical wise, or, who are the people at a senior level who can give that kind of money, and if they are willing to hear you out, right? So one-on-one works best. So try that first. If that doesn't work, what can you do, right? Generally, these companies have all hands meet, or depending on the size of the organization, of course. Can you present it at their all hands meet about your organization so that it reaches everyone at least? And in that presentation, without making an explicit ask, you can always put in subtle numbers as to say, this is what a 5 lakh donation can do, this is what a 3 lakh can do, and a 1 lakh can do after giving your overall pitch. And in the end, leave room for saying, if you would like to contribute, this is what can happen type thing. But that is less preferred option. The conversion rate, I'll be honest with you, will be less than 10%. But nevertheless, in the sense of whether they come back to you type thing is going to be very, very limited. But the senior level giving circle is something you can figure out. Similarly, for the mid-level, again, can you form a community of such givers, right, and encourage them to do it? And it could be Day of Caring, institute like a Day of Caring in their organization where everybody comes, sees the beneficiaries on ground, does some activity, but close it out with an ask and make it easy for people to give. So have a sign-up desk or a donation desk right there, a Paytm kind of option, because these days, whatever works in terms of immediate conversion, because the momentum and the passion to give is very high if they have seen the work on ground and in action. And so you need to capitalize on that momentum as well. And I'm sure that goes for the retail as well, but I'll let the DanaMojo team answer that part.
Okay, I think, do we have any more questions first? I think we'll focus first on the HNI part in this, and we can pick up this question in one of our sessions later on. Okay, so we do have, I have one more question from the chat from Ravindra, who has asked who, and I think it's a very tactical and an interesting question. It says, who should do the follow-up? Should it be the board member who connects or should it be the fundraising team?
It should ideally be the fundraising team if he or she has been part of that meeting, but with a copy to the board member. So make sure that whoever has made the connect to you, depending on, again, how close you are to that connect, keep them copied in maybe 1 or 2 of the follow-ups, and that make sure that the priority to that is given strongly.
We could probably just see if anyone else has a question.
Yeah. If anyone else has a question, please post it on chat or raise your hand. Okay. As you all know, DanaMojo is an integrated payment solution platform, and we conduct these webinars to exchange knowledge and grow in terms of fundraising. So if you are interested in this platform, I'm putting in the link. Please fill in the inquiry form over here, and then we will get back to you. We do also post the recording of these webinars, which can help you in your work towards fundraising. These recordings are available on our YouTube channel, and also for the future sessions. In case you are not able to attend the session on time, you could register so that you can get the registration, you could get the recording link. Yeah, thank you, Deepa, and also Manisha for taking out time, and also other participants for taking out your time and making the best of this webinar. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deepa.